The whispers followed Zelda Fairchild like shadows as she trudged down the dusty main street of Redemption Springs, Arizona Territory, 1885. She clutched the leather satchel containing her divorce papers against her chest, a shield and a burden both. The morning sun beat down mercilessly, but it couldn't match the heat of judgment in the townsfolk's stares. "There she goes, damaged goods," came a whisper from Mrs. Holloway outside the general store. "Couldn't keep a husband." "What kind of woman fails at that?" replied Mrs. Peterson, not bothering to lower her voice. Zelda kept her chin high, though her throat tightened with each step. At 25, she'd never imagined herself divorced, especially in a place where such status marked a woman as defective. 3 years of marriage to Gerald Thompson had left her with nothing but scars, some visible, most not, and papers declaring her a failure at the one thing women were supposed to succeed at. The divorce had been finalized yesterday in Tucson, after months of legal wrangling and Gerald's attempts to block it. Returning to Redemption Springs felt like walking into a lion's den wearing a dress of fresh meat, but Zelda had nowhere else to go. Her small dress shop was here, the business she'd built with her own hands that Gerald had never managed to take from her. As she approached her shop, she saw the fresh paint splashed across her front window. Harlot. The red dripped like blood in the morning light. Her stomach twisted, but she refused to let tears fall. Not here. Not where they could see. "Quite the homecoming," drawled a deep voice from behind her. Zelda whirled around, her hand instinctively reaching for the small derringer hidden in her pocket. She'd learned the hard way to be prepared. The man who stood before her was a stranger, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a storm-tossed sky. He wore the practical attire of a working cowboy, worn leather chaps over denims, a faded blue shirt, and a Stetson pulled low, not the clothing of a townsman. "I don't believe we've met," Zelda replied carefully, not relaxing her guard. "Levi Lawson," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Just arrived in town yesterday. Seems I'm missing some local gossip." He nodded toward the defaced window. "Then count yourself fortunate," Zelda said, reaching for her shop key. "Gossip is Redemption Springs' primary export." He studied the red paint with a frown. "Need help cleaning that off?" "I can manage," she answered, perhaps too quickly. "I've had practice." A flash of understanding crossed his features, followed by something that looked remarkably like respect. "Those divorce papers you're clutching like they might fly away," Levi said, his voice lowering to ensure only she could hear. "They cost you plenty, I'd wager. But from where I'm standing, madam, freedom looks good on you." Zelda stared at him, searching for the mockery, the judgment, the ulterior motive. She found none. Just steady gray eyes returning her gaze without flinching. "Most folks around here don't see it that way," she finally said. "Most folks around here probably never had to fight for their freedom," he replied simply. "I've seen enough of the world to know it's the most valuable thing a person can possess." Before Zelda could respond, a commotion down the street drew their attention. A wagon had pulled up in front of the saloon, and the driver, a ruddy-faced man with a thick mustache, was shouting. "That'd be my new employer," Levi said. "I've signed on as foreman at the Circle P Ranch." He touched his hat again. "Miss Fairchild, Zelda Fairchild, Miss Fairchild." "A pleasure. I expect I'll be needing some new shirts soon." He nodded toward her shop sign, "Fairchild Fine Garments. I look forward to conducting business." As he walked away, Zelda felt something stir inside her, something she'd thought Gerald had killed long ago. Interest, curiosity. The dangerous beginnings of hope. She unlocked her shop, stepped inside, and set her satchel of divorce papers on the counter. For the first time since the judge had signed them, she didn't feel like hiding them away. Freedom. Perhaps it did look good on her after all. The shop bell jingled 3 times that morning, once for Mrs. Holloway, who pretended she needed thread but really came to sniff out details about the divorce. Once for young Sally Jenkins, who needed her Sunday dress let out and whose mother had evidently not forbidden her from patronizing the divorcee's shop. And once for Widow Carson, who had always been kind to Zelda and who ordered a new shawl with a sympathetic smile. None of them mentioned the paint on the window, though Mrs. Holloway's eyes had lingered on it with poorly disguised satisfaction. Zelda had scrubbed at it during quiet moments, but the paint had dried in the hot sun, and it would take more than water to remove it completely. By midday, Zelda's stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since yesterday's meager lunch on the stagecoach. She locked up the shop and headed toward Martha's Cafe, one of the few establishments where she might find a meal without excessive staring. She was halfway there when she heard the commotion. A group had gathered in front of the bank, and at the center stood her former husband, Gerald Thompson. Her blood ran cold. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd taken a job in Prescott after the divorce, or so her lawyer had told her. Gerald was gesturing animatedly, his voice carrying across the street. "Forcing me out of my rightful home, taking what was mine. That's what these modern women are doing, gentlemen. Given an inch, they'll take your livelihood." Zelda froze, her appetite vanishing. Gerald had never hit her where it would show, and he'd been careful to seem the perfect gentleman in public. That, combined with her status as an outsider, she'd only moved to Redemption Springs after their marriage, had made her divorce claims difficult for many to believe. She turned to retreat to her shop, but Gerald spotted her. His handsome face transformed into something only she would recognize, the look that had preceded the worst nights of their marriage. "There she is," he called out. "The woman herself. Come to gloat, Zelda." Every eye turned to her. Zelda's legs trembled, but she held her ground. Running would only feed the narrative Gerald was spinning. "I have no interest in speaking with you, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Our business was concluded in court. Business." That's all marriage was to her, gentlemen, Gerald said to the crowd. A business arrangement she discarded when it no longer suited her whims. Mayor Blackwell stepped forward, placing a hand on Gerald's shoulder. "Now, Thompson, this isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," Gerald interrupted. "The people of Redemption Springs deserve to know what kind of woman is operating a business in their town. A woman who abandons her sacred vows." "Sacred?" The word burst from Zelda before she could stop it. "Was it sacred when you broke my ribs? When you locked me in the root cellar for 2 days? When you lies," Gerald shouted, his face flushing. "Vicious lies from a woman scorned. That's enough." The voice cut through the tension like a knife, deep, authoritative, brooking no argument. Levi Lawson stepped into the circle, positioning himself between Zelda and Gerald. "This is a private matter," Gerald said, his confidence faltering slightly in the face of Levi's imposing presence. "Nothing private about shouting accusations in the middle of town," Levi replied calmly. "The lady seems uninterested in continuing this conversation. I suggest you respect her wishes." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "And who might you be to interfere in matters that don't concern you?" "Someone who doesn't care for bullies," Levi answered, his tone conversational but with an undercurrent of steel. "Especially those who harass women in public." A tense silence fell. Gerald glanced around at the crowd, clearly calculating whether he had enough support to press the issue. Mayor Blackwell looked uncomfortable, but made no move to intervene further. "This isn't over, Zelda," Gerald finally said. "The court may have been fooled by your theatrics, but these good people know better." He turned and stalked away, several men following him toward the saloon. Levi turned to Zelda. "You all right?" She nodded, though the trembling had spread from her legs to her hands. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." Levi, he corrected. And no thanks necessary. That fella seems like the sort who makes himself feel big by making others feel small. The remaining onlookers were dispersing, some with sympathetic glances toward Zelda, others whispering behind their hands. I was heading to Martha's for lunch, Levi continued. Care to join me? Seems like having company might discourage further conversations. The offer was tempting, more than tempting, but Zelda had learned caution the hard way. That's kind, but I wouldn't want to impose. No imposition. Truth be told, I hate eating alone. His smile was easy, genuine. Besides, I still want to ask about those shirts. My current ones aren't fitting for a foreman. It was a graceful way to make the invitation about business rather than charity or, worse, courtship. Zelda found herself nodding. In that case, I accept. Thank you. Martha's cafe was blessedly half empty when they arrived. Martha herself, a robust woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, greeted them with raised eyebrows but no comment on their unexpected pairing. The special today is beef stew, she informed them, leading them to a corner table. Fresh bread, too. Sounds perfect, Levi said, waiting for Zelda to be seated before taking his own chair. When Martha had gone to fetch their meals, Zelda found herself at a loss for words. The adrenaline from the confrontation was fading, leaving her drained and suddenly self-conscious. How long have you been in Redemption Springs? Levi asked, breaking the silence. Nearly 4 years, Zelda answered. I came after marrying Gerald. He had business interests here. She paused. The dress shop was my idea. I'd been a seamstress in Tucson before. You've got talent, Levi observed. I noticed the stitching on Mayor Blackwell's vest. Your work, surprised by his perceptiveness, Zelda nodded. Yes, before. Before things deteriorated with Gerald, I had quite a few customers among the town's leading citizens. And now, she gave a small, rueful smile. Now I mostly sew for the children, minors, and occasional travelers. Respectable ladies find other seamstresses. Martha returned with bowls of fragrant stew and a basket of warm bread. Anything else you'll be needing? This looks wonderful, Martha, thank you, Zelda said when they were alone again. Levi broke off a piece of bread. What will you do now? Stay in Redemption Springs? It was the question that had kept Zelda awake for nights. The shop is all I have, she said simply. I built it from nothing. Gerald. He controlled everything else, but he allowed the shop because it brought in money and because he thought it kept me occupied. Her hands tightened around her spoon. I won't give it up. Not for him, not for wagging tongues. Good, Levi said, surprising her again. At her questioning look, he continued. Too many folks let others drive them from what's rightfully theirs. Takes courage to stand your ground. Some would call it stubbornness or foolishness. Some don't know the difference between standing up for yourself and being stubborn. He took a bite of stew. This is good. They ate in companionable silence for a while. Zelda found herself studying him when he wasn't looking. There was something steady about Levi Lawson, a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with the bluster and dominance Gerald had always displayed. How long have you been working as a ranch hand? She asked eventually. Since I was 16, he replied. Started in Texas, worked my way west. Took the foreman job at Circle P after the old foreman, Jim Parker, retired last month. That's quite a responsibility. It's a good spread. Patrick Peterson runs a tight operation, but he's fair. Pays on time, which is more than can be said for some ranchers I've worked for. Zelda nearly choked on her stew. Peterson? As in Margaret Peterson's husband, Levi nodded. You know her, she's one of the ladies who. Zelda hesitated. Who finds my situation most objectionable? Understanding dawned in Levi's eyes. Ah. The one who was commenting outside your shop this morning, the very same. Levi considered this. Well, Mrs. Peterson isn't signing my paychecks. Her husband is, and he strikes me as a man who judges based on work, not gossip. I hope you're right, Zelda said. For your sake. The cafe door swung open, admitting Mrs. Peterson herself, along with two other ladies of the town's social circle. Their chatter stopped abruptly when they spotted Zelda and Levi. Mr. Lawson, Mrs. Peterson said after a moment, her voice chilly. I see you've made new acquaintances. Quickly, Levi rose and tipped his hat. Mrs. Peterson. Yes, I was fortunate to meet Miss Fairchild this morning. She's agreed to sew some new shirts for me. I mentioned to your husband that I'd need proper attire as foreman, and he suggested I seek out the best seamstress in town. His words hung in the air, a subtle but clear counter to the narrative Gerald had been spreading. Mrs. Peterson's mouth tightened, caught between her disdain for Zelda and her inability to contradict her husband's supposed recommendation. How practical, she finally said. Ladies, shall we? She led her companions to a table as far from Zelda and Levi as the small cafe allowed. When Levi sat down again, Zelda gave him a questioning look. Did Mr. Peterson really recommend me? A glint of mischief appeared in Levi's eyes. Not in so many words. But he did say the town had a fine seamstress, and I'm merely assuming he meant the most talented one. For the first time in months, Zelda found herself smiling, really smiling. Mr. Lawson, I believe you might be a troublemaker. Only when trouble needs making, Miss Fairchild. He finished his stew. Now, about those shirts. I'm serious about needing them. When might I come by for measurements? The day was fading into dusk by the time Zelda returned to her shop. The confrontation with Gerald had left her drained, but lunch with Levi had restored something she hadn't realized. She was missing a sense that not everyone in the world was against her. She unlocked the shop, lighting lamps against the gathering darkness. The red paint still marred her window, but somehow it seemed less important now. Tomorrow she would buy turpentine and remove it properly. As she moved to close the curtains, a movement across the street caught her eye. Gerald, standing in the shadows between buildings, watching her shop. Their eyes met through the glass, and the cold, calculating look in his made her shiver. He touched the brim of his hat in a mocking salute before melting back into the darkness. Zelda's hand trembled as she pulled the curtains closed. The encounter was a stark reminder that whatever momentary reprieve she'd found in Levi Lawson's company, her battles were far from over. The next morning dawned clear and promising. Zelda arrived at her shop early, armed with a bottle of turpentine, rags, and determination. The offensive word would be gone before the town fully woke. She was scrubbing vigorously when a shadow fell across the window. Need a hand with that? Zelda turned to find Levi standing there, hat in hand, looking freshly shaven and more presentable than yesterday. You seem to make a habit of offering help, she observed, but without rancor, only where it's needed. He nodded toward the window. That's a two-person job if I ever saw one. After a moment's hesitation, Zelda handed him a rag and the turpentine. I won't refuse capable hands. They worked in companionable silence, Levi taking the higher portions that Zelda couldn't easily reach. The paint came away grudgingly, but between them they made quick progress. I saw him last night, Zelda said suddenly. Gerald, watching the shop. Levi's hands paused in their scrubbing. Did he approach you? No, just watched, like he used to do when he was deciding on a punishment. She hadn't meant to say that last part aloud, but it slipped out. Levi's expression darkened. Man like that, measuring out pain like it's his right. He always said it was for my own good, Zelda said quietly. To make me a better wife. Nothing good about hurting someone weaker, Levi replied, his voice low and intense. My pa taught me that early, said any man who raises his hand to a woman is no man at all. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. Levi resumed scrubbing. Lost him 5 years back, caught a fever that turned to pneumonia. I'm sorry. He lived a good life, taught me and my brothers how to work hard, treat people fair. A small smile touched his lips. And how to appreciate a woman with spirit. Zelda felt a blush rise to her cheeks and turned her attention back to the window. There, she said after a few more minutes of work. I think that's the last of it. The window was clean again, the glass sparkling in the morning sunlight. It felt symbolic, somehow a small victory, but significant. Thank you, she said, taking the rag from Levi. You didn't have to do this. Wanted to, he replied simply. He glanced at the sky. I should head to the ranch. Mr. Peterson's expecting me for the morning roundup. He hesitated. Would it be all right if I came by this afternoon for those measurements? For the shirts, of course, say 4 o'clock. The shop is usually quiet then. 4 it is. He settled his hat back on his head. Miss Fairchild, Mr. Lawson. She watched him walk away, his stride long and confident. Zelda found herself looking forward to 4 o'clock with an anticipation she hadn't felt in years. It was business, she reminded herself. Just business. But the flutter in her stomach told a different story. The morning passed in a blur of customers more than usual. Zelda noted with some surprise. Word of Gerald's return and yesterday's confrontation had evidently spread, and curiosity was temporarily overcoming social convention. Most came with small mending jobs, a few with orders for new garments. All spent more time than necessary examining the shop, as if looking for evidence of Zelda's supposed moral failings. By the time the lunch hour arrived, Zelda was both exhausted and exhilarated. The cash box held more coins than it had in weeks, and her order book had several new entries. If nothing else, scandal was good for business. She was about to lock up for a quick meal when the door opened again. The woman who entered was unfamiliar tall, with striking auburn hair tucked neatly under a fashionable hat. Her dress was expensive but practical, the sort worn by a woman of means who didn't need to flaunt her wealth. Miss Fairchild, the woman inquired, her voice carrying a hint of an Eastern accent. Yes, how may I help you? I'm Vivian Abbott. I've just arrived in town to join my brother, Dr. Abbott. She extended a gloved hand. I understand you're the finest seamstress in Redemption Springs. Zelda accepted the handshake, surprised by the firm grip. That's very kind, but I'm sure opinions vary on that matter. A knowing smile touched Vivian's lips. Yes, I've already encountered some of those, varying opinions. However, I prefer to make my own judgments. She gestured to Zelda's own dress, a simple but elegantly tailored garment of deep blue cotton. Your work speaks for itself. Thank you, Miss Abbott. Please, call me Vivian. Miss Abbott makes me feel like a schoolmarm, which I was for far too long. She glanced around the shop with an appreciative eye. I require several new garments suitable for a doctor's assistant. My brother has finally agreed to let me help in his practice, and my Boston wardrobe is entirely unsuitable for the work. You're to be a doctor's assistant. Zelda couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Women in medicine were rare enough in the East, let alone in a frontier town. Indeed. I trained as a nurse during the war against my family's wishes, of course. When William decided to move west, I insisted on coming with him. Our parents are gone, and I saw little point in remaining in Boston alone. Vivian's direct gaze held a challenge, as if daring Zelda to disapprove. Instead, Zelda felt a surge of admiration. I think it's admirable. The town could certainly use more medical expertise. Vivian's posture relaxed slightly. I'm glad you think so. Not everyone shares that view. I'm familiar with the feeling, Zelda said dryly. Yes, well. Vivian removed her gloves. I understand we're both women who have chosen unconventional paths. Perhaps that's why William suggested I come to you rather than ordering my clothes from the catalog. Zelda's professional instincts took over. I'd be delighted to create suitable garments for you. Do you have time for measurements now? That's why I'm here. William is setting up the clinic and has no need of me until later. Vivian began unbuttoning her jacket. I should warn you, I prefer practicality over fashion. Pockets are essential. A woman after my own heart, Zelda said, reaching for her measuring tape. By the time Vivian left, Zelda had sketched designs for 3 serviceable dresses with multiple pockets, a sturdy apron, and a walking suit that would allow the doctor's sister to move freely around town. More importantly, she felt she'd made a potential ally, perhaps even a friend. The afternoon crawled by as Zelda found herself checking the clock with increasing frequency. At 3:30, she shooed out Mrs. Jenkins, who had been lingering over fabric selections for far longer than necessary, clearly hoping to still be present when the handsome new foreman arrived. At precisely 4 o'clock, the shop bell jangled. Levi Lawson stepped inside, removing his hat. He'd clearly washed up after his day's work, his hair still damp at the temples, his face freshly scrubbed. "Miss Fairchild," he greeted her, "Mr. Lawson, right on time. My pa always said punctuality is a form of respect." He glanced around the shop. "Busy day?" "Surprisingly so," Zelda admitted, coming around the counter with her measuring tape. "I think scandal has made me interesting again." A smile quirked his lips. "Their loss has been your gain, then. For now, at least." She gestured for him to stand straight. "Arms out, please." As she took his measurements, shoulders, chest, waist, arms, Zelda was acutely aware of his physical presence in a way that both unsettled and intrigued her. Levi stood patiently, moving as directed, his eyes following her with quiet intensity. "How many shirts were you thinking?" she asked, noting the measurements in her book. 3 to start. Something durable but presentable. As foreman, I need to look the part when meeting with Mr. Peterson's business associates. I have some excellent cotton broadcloth that would be perfect. Perhaps in white, blue, and a subtle stripe. Zelda moved to a shelf, pulling down bolts of fabric for his inspection. Levi ran his fingers over the materials with surprising discernment. "These are fine quality. You know fabrics. My mother was a seamstress," he explained. "Before she passed, when I was 12, I used to help her sort deliveries." Another piece of the puzzle that was Levi Lawson fell into place for Zelda. "I'm sorry about your mother. It was a long time ago." He selected the blue and white fabrics, then pointed to a different striped pattern than the one she'd suggested. "This one, I think. Excellent choices." Zelda made notes in her book. "I can have the first one ready by the end of the week if that suits. More than fair." He hesitated, then added, "I saw Gerald Thompson at the saloon today." Zelda's hand stilled over her book. "Oh, he was telling anyone who'd listen about how you'd wronged him." Levi's tone was careful, neutral, but I noticed something interesting. The men who have lived here longest, they didn't seem to be buying his story. "What do you mean?" Old Sam Barrett, he runs the livery, he got up and walked out mid-tale, and Sheriff Davis kept watching Thompson with a look that suggested he wasn't hearing anything new. Levi studied her face. "I get the feeling some folks knew what was happening, even if they didn't intervene." Zelda set down her pencil, her hand trembling slightly. "Gerald was careful. He had a respectable face he showed the world, but yes, I think some suspected. Mrs. Carson, the widow, she asked me once about a bruise on my arm. I made excuses." "Why did you stay?" The question was gentle, without judgment. "At first, because I thought I could make it work. That's what women are supposed to do, isn't it? Make marriages work." She moved to the window, looking out at the street without really seeing it. "Then because I was afraid. Gerald made it very clear what would happen if I tried to leave. And finally, because of the shop, it was the one thing that was truly mine, the one place I felt safe. She felt Levi move to stand behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could sense his warmth. The day I finally left, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, was after he broke 3 of my fingers because I'd used money from the shop to buy fabric without asking. I realized then that the shop wouldn't protect me forever. Nothing would except getting away from him. How did you do it? Leave, I mean. I waited until he went to Phoenix on business. Took what little money I had hidden away and went straight to Tucson, to a lawyer a traveling salesman had once mentioned to me, a man who'd helped his sister escape a similar situation. She turned to face Levi. It took months. Gerald fought it every step of the way. But the lawyer found witnesses, a former housekeeper who'd seen the bruises, a doctor in Tucson who treated me once. In the end, it was enough. That took courage, Levi said, his gray eyes holding hers. More courage than most men I know possess. It didn't feel like courage at the time. It felt like desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and gently took her right hand. His thumb brushed over the slightly crooked fingers, evidence of bones that hadn't healed quite straight. These are badges of honor, not shame. The tenderness in the gesture brought unexpected tears to Zelda's eyes. She withdrew her hand, not ready for the emotions his touch evoked. I should finish writing up your order, she said, moving back to the counter. Levi gave her the space she needed, turning his attention to a display of men's handkerchiefs. These are finely done. Your work. Grateful for the change of subject, Zelda nodded. Yes, the embroidery keeps my hands busy in the evenings. I'll take 2 then. A man in my position should have decent handkerchiefs. By the time he left, Zelda had composed herself again, their conversation returning to safer topics: the weather, the condition of the range lands, the upcoming town council meeting. But something had shifted between them. A trust had begun to form, fragile but real. As she locked up for the night, Zelda found herself thinking of the way Levi had looked at her scarred hand, not with pity or disgust, but with respect. It was a novel experience, and one that left her feeling both vulnerable and strangely hopeful. The next few days fell into a pattern. Zelda would open her shop in the morning, sometimes finding Levi waiting to walk with her from her small rented room behind the bakery. They would exchange pleasantries, discuss the weather or town happenings, then part ways as he headed to the Circle P and she to her work. Word of Gerald's version of events had spread throughout town, creating distinct camps: those who believed his tales of a deficient, ungrateful wife, and those who harbored doubts. To Zelda's surprise, the latter group seemed to be growing, particularly after Vivian Abbott publicly declared her intention to patronize Fairchild fine garments exclusively. Doctors' sisters carry weight, Levi observed over coffee one morning at Martha's. Especially unmarried ones with their own money. Vivian is a force of nature, Zelda agreed. She's already scandalized half the town by assisting with a birth yesterday. Apparently, lady doctors' assistants aren't supposed to see such things. Levi chuckled. Between you and Miss Abbott, Redemption Springs won't know what hit it. The easy camaraderie between them was a balm to Zelda's spirit. Levi never pressed for more than she was willing to give, never hinted at courtship or made inappropriate suggestions. He simply offered friendship, respect, and occasionally a strong arm when she had heavy bolts of fabric to move. It was more than enough, more than she dared hope for in the aftermath of her divorce. But Gerald remained a shadow over her newfound peace. Zelda would catch glimpses of him watching her from across the street, or hear whispers of new accusations he'd made at the saloon. Once, she found a dead rat on her doorstep, a clear message. The one she couldn't prove came from him. She mentioned none of this to Levi, not wanting to burden their fragile friendship with her troubles. But on the morning she arrived to find her shop door ajar, the lock broken. She couldn't hide the evidence. Levi found her standing amid the destruction, bolts of fabric slashed, spools of thread scattered, her order book torn to shreds. Worst of all, her sewing machine, the expensive Singer she'd saved for years to purchase, lay broken on the floor, its delicate mechanisms smashed beyond repair. Zelda. The use of her given name, the first time he'd allowed himself that intimacy, barely registered through her shock. "Who did this?" "You know who," she whispered, kneeling beside the ruined machine. "This was his wedding gift to me, the one good thing. And now he's taken even that." Levi crouched beside her, his face grim. "Have you told the sheriff?" "What's the point? Gerald will have an alibi, he always does." She picked up a piece of the machine, turning it over in her hand. "He knows exactly how to hurt me worst. The sheriff needs to see this." Levi's tone brooked no argument. "This isn't just mean-spirited mischief. This is destruction of livelihood." Before she could protest further, he was gone, returning minutes later with Sheriff Davis in tow. The lawman surveyed the damage with a practiced eye, his weathered face giving little away. "This is serious business, Miss Fairchild," he said finally. "Any idea who might have done it?" "I believe it was my ex-husband," Zelda said, finding her voice. "Gerald Thompson." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Can't say I'm surprised. Man's been making threats, according to several witnesses." He pulled out a small notebook. "I'll need a list of everything damaged and its approximate value." "You believe me?" Zelda couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Sheriff Davis's expression softened slightly. "Miss Fairchild, I've been sheriff here for 15 years. I've seen men like Thompson before. They're all charm in public and something else entirely behind closed doors." He glanced at Levi. "Mr. Lawson, would you be willing to help secure this door until the carpenter can come?" "Of course," Levi answered. "Good man." "Miss Fairchild, I'll send word when I've spoken to Thompson." With a tip of his hat, the sheriff departed. Left alone with Levi, Zelda suddenly felt the full weight of what had happened. Her business, her independence lay in ruins around her. The tears she'd been holding back began to fall, quiet but unstoppable. Without a word, Levi guided her to the small chair behind the counter, the only piece of furniture untouched in the rampage. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me, Zelda Fairchild. This isn't the end. It's a setback, that's all." His voice was steady, anchoring her. "We'll clean this up, salvage what we can. I'll talk to Mr. Peterson about advancing me some wages to help with repairs." "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you do that for me?" Something shifted in his eyes, a decision made, a boundary crossed. "Because in these past weeks I've come to care for you. More than I should, perhaps, given all you've been through. But I can't watch you suffer and do nothing." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Zelda searched his face, looking for signs of the manipulation she'd learned to fear from Gerald. She found none, only open sincerity and something warmer, something that made her heart beat faster despite everything. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll let me help," Levi replied. "Say you won't give up." She looked around at the destruction, at years of work reduced to tatters. But beneath the despair, a spark of defiance still burned. Gerald had meant to break her spirit along with her shop. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "I won't give up," she said, her voice strengthening. "But I can't accept your money, Levi. That wouldn't be right." "Then accept my hands," he said, rising. "Between the two of us, we can put this place back together." And so they began, sorting through the wreckage, salvaging what could be saved, making lists of what needed replacing. Word spread quickly, as it always did in small towns, and by midday they had unexpected help. Vivian Abbott arrived with her brother, the doctor bringing his tool kit to see if anything could be done for the sewing machine. Mrs. Carson came with sandwiches and coffee. Even Martha closed her cafe for an hour to lend a hand with the cleanup. Most surprising of all was the arrival of Patrick Peterson himself, a stern, taciturn man whom Zelda had met only in passing. He surveyed the damage, spoke briefly with Levi, then departed. He returned an hour later with 3 ranch hands carrying lumber and tools. "My wife informs me that a respectable town needs a respectable seamstress," he said gruffly to Zelda. "Can't have you operating with a broken door. My men will fix it properly." By sunset, the shop had been transformed. The door was repaired, the floor swept clean, and the salvageable fabric and notions organized on the remaining shelves. The sewing machine was beyond immediate repair, but Dr. Abbott believed the main components could be salvaged and replacement parts ordered from Tucson. As the helpers departed, Zelda found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you all," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "No need for thanks," Mrs. Carson said, patting her arm. "We look after our own in Redemption Springs. Should have done it sooner, perhaps." Her eyes held a hint of apology. Vivian lingered after the others had gone. "William and I have discussed it," she said without preamble. "Until your machine is repaired, you're welcome to use the one at our house. It's not as fine as yours was, but it will serve for basic work." "That's incredibly generous," Zelda began, but Vivian waved away her thanks. "Nonsense. It's practical. I need those dresses you designed, and you can hardly make them without a machine." Her brisk tone softened. "Besides, I find I enjoy your company, Zelda. It would be pleasant to have another woman about while I work on my medical texts." After Vivian left, only Levi remained, putting away the last of the tools. "You have more friends than you realized," he observed, watching Zelda's face. "It seems so," she agreed, still processing the day's events. "I never expected." "People surprise you sometimes," Levi said, "for better or worse." The mention of worse brought Gerald back to her thoughts. "The sheriff hasn't returned. I wonder if he found Gerald." "He'll let you know when he has news." Levi wiped his hands on a rag. "In the meantime, you need rest. It's been a long day." "I can't leave the shop unattended, not with the door only temporarily secured." "I'll stay," Levi said simply. "Sleep in the chair there. No one will bother the place with me keeping watch." Zelda started to protest, then realized how exhausted she truly was. The emotional toll of the day had drained her completely. "You've already done so much," she said. "What's one night more?" His smile was gentle. "Go to your room, Zelda. Get some sleep. Things will look better in the morning." Too tired to argue further, she nodded. "Thank you, Levi, for everything today." "No thanks needed," he replied, echoing Mrs. Carson's words. "Get some rest now." As Zelda walked the short distance to her rented room, she found herself contemplating the strange turns her life had taken. A month ago, she'd returned to Redemption Springs a divorced woman, shamed and isolated. Now, despite Gerald's best efforts, she found herself surrounded by unexpected allies. And Levi Lawson. His declaration of caring had settled in her heart, a warm presence she wasn't yet ready to examine too closely. After Gerald, the idea of trusting a man with her feelings seemed impossible. And yet, sleep claimed her before she could follow the thought further, her dreams for once untainted by fear. The next morning, Zelda woke to urgent knocking at her door. She rose quickly, wrapping a shawl around her nightdress, and opened the door to find Vivian Abbott looking unusually disheveled. "You need to come quickly," Vivian said without preamble. "There's been an incident." Dread pooled in Zelda's stomach. What kind of incident? Gerald Thompson was found badly beaten behind the saloon this morning, Vivian explained, her voice low. He's at the clinic now. William is treating him. What does that have to do with me? Zelda asked, though she already feared the answer. He's accusing Levi Lawson of the attack. Zelda's blood ran cold. That's absurd. Levi was at my shop all night, keeping watch. I believe you, Vivian said. But the sheriff needs to hear it directly. He's at the clinic now, taking statements. Give me 5 minutes to dress, Zelda said, closing the door. Her hands trembled as she donned a simple dress and pinned up her hair. The thought of Gerald using this situation to harm Levi made her sick with worry. She knew firsthand how persuasive Gerald could be, how easily he could twist facts to suit his narrative. Vivian escorted her to the small building that served as Redemption Springs Medical Clinic. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Sheriff Davis stood by the examination table where Gerald lay, his face a mass of bruises, one arm splinted. Dr. Abbott looked up as they entered. Miss Fairchild, my sister explained the situation. Yes, Zelda replied, keeping her eyes on the sheriff rather than her ex-husband. Levi Lawson could not have attacked Gerald Thompson last night. He was at my shop from sundown until dawn, keeping watch after the break-in. Convenient alibi, Gerald mumbled through swollen lips. She'd say anything for her lover. Mr. Lawson is not my lover, Zelda said firmly. He's a friend who offered help when my business was vandalized, an act I believe you responsible for. Sheriff Davis held up a hand. One matter at a time, Miss Fairchild. Mr. Thompson here claims he was set upon by Lawson around midnight, accused of destroying your shop, and beaten as retribution. You're saying that's impossible because Lawson was with you? He wasn't with me exactly. I was at my lodgings. But he remained at the shop all night to ensure no further damage occurred. Zelda met the sheriff's gaze steadily. You can verify this with Martha Baker. She brought him coffee and biscuits around 10 o'clock and again at dawn. The sheriff made a note in his book. I'll check that. Where is Lawson now? I don't know. He should have been at the shop when I woke. He's at the Circle P, came a new voice. Patrick Peterson stood in the doorway, his imposing figure filling the frame. Rode out at first light to help with a calving. Been there since, according to my wife, who brought the men breakfast at sunrise. Sheriff Davis nodded. Mr. Peterson, your word carries weight here. As it should, Peterson replied. Lawson's a good man, works hard, deals straight. Not the sort to ambush someone in the dark, no matter the provocation. His eyes flicked to Gerald with unmistakable distaste. Gerald struggled to sit up. You're all conspiring against me. First my wife turns the town against me with her lies. Now this drifter attacks me and you're taking his side. Ex-wife, Zelda corrected quietly. And I've told no lies about you, Gerald. I haven't needed to. Dr. Abbott pressed Gerald back onto the table. Lie still, Mr. Thompson, or you'll worsen your injuries. 3 ribs are cracked, and that arm won't heal properly if you keep moving it. Sheriff, Peterson said, my men reported seeing 3 men from the mining camp headed out of town at dawn, all of them showing signs of a fight. Might be worth asking if they crossed paths with Thompson here. Gerald's eyes widened slightly, just enough for Zelda, who knew his expressions well, to recognize guilt. That's ridiculous, Gerald protested. I've never associated with miners. Really? Peterson raised an eyebrow. Because my foreman mentioned seeing you at their camp 2 days ago, looking to hire muscle. Said you offered good money for a special job. Sheriff Davis's expression hardened. That's so, Thompson. He's lying. Mr. Peterson doesn't lie, the sheriff said mildly. It's one of his more inconvenient qualities from a lawman's perspective. Makes it hard to ignore what he has to say. Zelda watched the exchange with growing understanding. Gerald had likely hired the miners to vandalize her shop, then double-crossed them somehow, perhaps by refusing payment. Their retribution had been predictably violent. "Sheriff," she said, "I'd like to formally withdraw any accusation against Levi Lawson. It's clear he had nothing to do with Mr. Thompson's injuries." "Noted," Sheriff Davis replied, "and I believe I need to have a conversation with some miners." He turned to Gerald. "Mr. Thompson, once the doctor clears you, I suggest you make arrangements to leave Redemption Springs. Your presence is causing more trouble than this town needs." "You can't run me out of town," Gerald sputtered. "I have rights." "No one's running you anywhere," the sheriff replied evenly. "I'm merely suggesting that your business interests might be better pursued elsewhere." The implication was clear. Stay and face possible charges for the shop vandalism. Gerald's face flushed with anger, but for once he held his tongue. Outside the clinic, Zelda took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling as though a great weight had been lifted. "That was well done," Vivian said, falling into step beside her. "You stood your ground admirably." "It felt different this time," Zelda admitted. "Having people believe me, support me." "I'm not used to that." "You should become accustomed to it," Vivian replied. "True friends stand with you in difficult times, like you've done." Vivian smiled, a rare, genuine expression that softened her practical demeanor. "I recognize a kindred spirit when I meet one, Zelda Fairchild." Independent women must support each other in this world of men. They parted at the corner, Vivian returning to the clinic to assist her brother, Zelda continuing to her shop. She found it as they had left it the night before, but with a note pinned to the repaired door. "Had to ride out early. P. Peterson needed help with a difficult calving. Will return by noon to help with shelving. L." She traced the bold, clear handwriting with her finger, a smile tugging at her lips. It was a small thing, a simple note, a considerate gesture, but it represented something she'd never had with Gerald: respect. Levi had not abandoned his post on a whim. He'd left for a legitimate purpose and taken the time to let her know. The contrast between the two men could not have been starker. Where Gerald took and demanded, Levi gave freely. Where Gerald sought to control through fear, Levi offered support without conditions. It was too soon for her heart to fully trust such differences. But as Zelda unlocked her shop to begin another day of rebuilding, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that not all men were like her ex-husband. Some, perhaps, were worth the risk of caring. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Word of Gerald's suspected involvement in the vandalism spread through town, shifting public opinion further in Zelda's favor. When he left Redemption Springs 3 days after the beating ostensibly for business in Tucson, though everyone knew he wouldn't return, there was a palpable sense of relief. Zelda's shop gradually returned to normal operation. Dr. Abbott had been right about the sewing machine. With parts ordered from Tucson, it was soon restored to working condition. Customers returned, some sheepishly apologizing for their earlier coldness. Zelda accepted their business with grace, neither holding grudges nor forgetting who had stood by her when it mattered. Through it all, Levi remained a steady presence. He helped rebuild shelves, carried heavy deliveries, and occasionally escorted her to Sunday services, where they sat with Vivian and Dr. Abbott, forming a small island of progressive thinking in the traditional congregation. They developed a comfortable routine: coffee together some mornings, occasional suppers at Martha's Cafe, walks along the creek on Sundays after church. They spoke of many things: Levi's years working cattle across the West, Zelda's childhood in Tucson, where her father had been a shopkeeper, books they had read, dreams they still harbored. They did not speak of the future or of the growing attachment between them. It was too fragile, too precious to examine directly. Instead, they allowed it to develop naturally, neither rushing nor denying the deepening of their connection. On a warm evening in late May, a month after Gerald's departure, Levi invited Zelda to ride out to the Circle P for supper with the Peterson family. "Mrs. Peterson specifically asked for you to come," he explained, seeming almost nervous. "She's been working on mending fences, I think." "Fences?" Zelda asked, puzzled. Levi's smile was wry. "Social ones. She feels badly about her earlier treatment of you. This is her way of making amends publicly." The invitation was significant, a formal acknowledgement of Zelda's respectability from one of the town's leading matrons. After a moment's consideration, she accepted. The Circle P ranch sprawled across several thousand acres of prime grazing land north of town. The main house was substantial but not ostentatious, a well-built two-story structure with a wide veranda and comfortable furnishings that spoke of prosperity, earned through hard work rather than inheritance. Margaret Peterson greeted them at the door, her earlier frostiness replaced by an almost excessive warmth. "Miss Fairchild, how lovely you could join us. Mr. Lawson speaks so highly of you. Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Peterson," Zelda replied, determined to meet graciousness with graciousness. "Your home is beautiful. Please call me Margaret. We're not so formal here at the ranch." Supper was a surprisingly pleasant affair. Patrick Peterson proved to be taciturn but thoughtful, with a dry wit that emerged after his second glass of wine. Their two teenage daughters were polite and curious about Zelda's work as a seamstress. Margaret, though clearly making an effort to compensate for past behavior, seemed genuinely interested in Zelda's opinions on everything from fabric trends to the proposed school expansion. Throughout the meal, Zelda was aware of Levi watching her, not with Gerald's evaluating gaze, measuring her against some impossible standard, but with quiet admiration. When their eyes met across the table, the warmth in his made her cheeks flush like a schoolgirl's. After the meal, while Margaret showed Zelda her collection of family quilts, Patrick took Levi aside for what appeared to be a serious conversation. They returned looking satisfied, with Patrick clapping Levi on the shoulder in a gesture of approval. The ride back to town beneath a star-strewn sky was peaceful. Levi had borrowed a gentle mare for Zelda, and they rode side by side, the horses picking their way carefully in the moonlight. "That went well," Levi observed. "The Petersons like you." "They're good people," Zelda replied. "I can see why you respect them." "Patrick's offered me a partnership," Levi said after a moment. "A small stake in the Circle P with the possibility of more in the future. His sons have no interest in ranching, both gone east to school, and he needs someone to eventually take over operations." Zelda turned to look at him, though his face was shadowed in the darkness. "Levi, that's wonderful. A real opportunity." "It would mean staying in Redemption Springs," he said, his tone careful, "putting down roots. Is that what you want? You've spoken of how you enjoy the freedom of moving on when the spirit takes you." "I'm finding that some kinds of freedom matter more than others," he replied. "The freedom to build something lasting, the freedom to care for someone." The words hung in the night air between them, full of unspoken meaning. Zelda's heart beat faster, hope and fear tangling in her chest. "I've accepted his offer," Levi continued when she didn't respond. "I'll be staying." "I'm glad," Zelda said softly. "Redemption Springs would be poorer without you." They rode in silence for a while longer, the town lights gradually coming into view. As they approached the livery where they would leave the horses, Levi cleared his throat. "Zelda, there's something I need to ask you." She reined in her mare, turning to face him fully. "Yes." In the silver moonlight, his expression was earnest, almost vulnerable. I know you've had good reasons to distrust men's intentions, and I'd understand if you're not ready for what I'm hoping for between us." "And what is that, Levi?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A chance. A chance to court you properly. To show you that not all men are like Gerald Thompson, that some of us know how to treasure a woman's strength rather than try to break it." He reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "I care for you, Zelda Fairchild, more than I've cared for anyone in a very long time, but I'll wait if that's what you need, however long it takes." Tears pricked at Zelda's eyes, not tears of sadness or fear, but of a joy so unexpected it almost hurt. In that moment, she saw with perfect clarity what had been gradually becoming evident over these past weeks. Levi Lawson was nothing like Gerald. He never had been. And the feelings she'd been cautiously nurturing for him were stronger than she'd allowed herself to acknowledge. "I don't think I need to wait," she said, squeezing his hand. I think I've been waiting long enough for someone like you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. "Do you mean that?" "I do," she said, the words carrying a weight and promise that made her both terrified and exhilarated. "I care for you too, Levi, and I'd like to see where that caring might lead us." He brought her hand to his lips, placing a gentle kiss on her knuckles. "That's all I ask. A chance to walk this path together and see where it takes us." As they rode the final distance into town, their hands remained linked between them, a bridge connecting their separate journeys into a shared one. For Zelda, it felt like crossing a threshold she'd thought permanently closed to her, the threshold to a future where love might be not a prison, but the truest form of freedom. The courtship of Zelda Fairchild and Levi Lawson became the subject of much speculation in Redemption Springs over the subsequent months. They made no secret of their attachment, though they conducted themselves with a propriety that gave even the most determined gossips little to criticize. Levi called at Zelda's shop regularly, bringing wildflowers or small gifts, a book of poetry, a finely crafted wooden spool holder for her work table, candied ginger from the general store because he'd noticed she enjoyed it. On Sundays, they attended church together, then often joined the Abbotts for dinner, the four of them forming a close-knit circle that expanded occasionally to include the Petersons or other friends. For Zelda, the most remarkable aspect of their relationship was how Levi consistently supported her independence. Unlike Gerald, who had viewed her shop as a threat to his authority, Levi took pride in her success. When a merchant from Tucson commissioned an entire trousseau for his daughter, Levi helped Zelda calculate a fair price that reflected the true value of her skilled work. "You sell yourself short sometimes," he told her one evening as they sat on the bench outside her shop, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and purple. "You're an artist with that needle." "Necessity taught me to be grateful for any business," she replied. "When Gerald controlled our finances, every penny I earned felt like a small victory." Levi's jaw tightened at the mention of her ex-husband, as it always did. "That's not your reality anymore. You get to set your worth now." "With your help," she acknowledged, resting her head against his shoulder. "Just pointing out what's already there," he said, wrapping an arm around her. "You'd have seen it yourself eventually." Such moments of easy affection had become precious to Zelda. Levi never pushed for more than she was ready to give, seeming to understand intuitively when she needed space and when she craved closeness. His touch was always gentle, always respectful, a stark contrast to Gerald's controlling grip. By August, with summer's heat beginning to wane, Zelda realized something significant had changed within her. The fear that had been her constant companion since leaving Gerald had receded, replaced by a growing confidence not just in her business abilities, but in her judgment of character. She trusted Levi trusted his words, his actions, his intentions. And with that trust came a deepening of her feelings for him. They were walking by the creek one golden evening when Zelda decided to give voice to those feelings. Fireflies were just beginning to emerge, their lights winking on and off among the cottonwoods. "I've been thinking," she began, her fingers laced with his. "A dangerous pastime," Levi teased, though his eyes were attentive. "About us, about the future." His step faltered slightly, then resumed. "What about it?" Zelda drew a deep breath. "When I left Gerald, I thought certain doors were closed to me forever. Marriage, a family, trust. I couldn't imagine wanting those things again, not after what they'd cost me." "That's understandable," Levi said carefully. "But you've shown me something I didn't expect, Levi, that those things don't have to be chains, that with the right person they can be." She searched for the right word. "Liberating." They stopped walking, Levi turning to face her fully, his expression a mixture of hope and caution. "Zelda, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you," she said simply, "and that if you were to ask certain questions about our future, I might be ready to hear them." Joy bloomed across his features, as tangible as the sunset colors painting the sky. "I love you too, Zelda Fairchild, have for a while now." He took both her hands in his. "But I don't want to rush you, are you sure?" "I'm sure about you," she replied. "The rest?" "Well, I think some fears only fade when you face them directly." Levi's smile was tender as he reached into his pocket. "I've been carrying this for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." He withdrew a small velvet pouch. "Wasn't sure it would ever come, or if I was asking too much." From the pouch, he produced a ring, a simple gold band set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It was my mother's," he explained. "Pa gave it to me before he passed, said to save it for a woman with spirit and grace. Seems he knew you before I did." Zelda's heart raced as Levi lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands. "Zelda Fairchild, you're the strongest, most determined woman I've ever known. Loving you has been the easiest thing I've ever done, and the most rewarding." His voice was steady, though she could feel a slight tremor in his hands. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not to change who you are or what you do, but to build something together that's better than what either of us could make alone." Tears blurred Zelda's vision, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Levi Lawson, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if made for her, then rose and gathered her into his arms. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with the promise of all they would share together. When they finally drew apart, breathless and smiling, Levi rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you this, Zelda. You'll never have to choose between your freedom and my love. They're not opposites in my mind." "I know," she said, understanding in that moment why she had been able to trust him when trust seemed impossible. "That's why I can give you both my heart and my hand." They shared the news with their friends, first Vivian and Dr. Abbott, who were delighted. The Petersons, who had clearly been expecting the announcement. Martha, who admitted to having a betting pool running on when Levi would propose. Then on Sunday, the engagement was announced formally in church. The reactions were varied but largely positive. Some of the older matrons still sniffed at the idea of a divorced woman remarrying, but most of the townspeople had come to respect Zelda's resilience and Levi's steadfast character. Besides, as Patrick Peterson commented dryly, "Any fool can see they're well matched." Wedding preparations began in earnest. Zelda designed her own dress, a confection of ivory silk with delicate embroidery she worked on during quiet evenings. Vivian, to everyone's surprise, revealed a talent for cake making and insisted on providing the wedding cake. Martha offered her café for the reception. Even Mrs. Holloway, perhaps seeing which way the wind was blowing, contributed by organizing a quilting bee to create a wedding present. Through it all, Zelda marveled at how different this experience was from her first marriage, where that had been characterized by Gerald's increasing control and her diminishing voice. Planning her wedding to Levi was a true partnership. They made decisions together, respecting each other's preferences, finding compromise where they differed. "Is it always going to be this easy?" she asked one evening as they sat on her shop's porch, going over lists of guests and arrangements. Levi chuckled. "I doubt it. We'll have our disagreements, I'm sure, but as long as we remember we're on the same side, we'll find our way through." "On the same side," Zelda repeated, liking the phrase. "Partners." "Exactly." The wedding was set for early October, when the weather would be mild and the Circle P'Tik's busiest season would have passed. Levi had begun construction on a small house halfway between town and the ranch, close enough for Zelda to maintain her shop, far enough to give them privacy and peace. As the day approached, Zelda found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. A year ago, she'd been fighting for her divorce, facing an uncertain future alone. Now she stood on the threshold of a new marriage, surrounded by friends, secure in her business and confident in her choice of partner. The night before the wedding, Vivian stayed with her in the small apartment she'd rented after outgrowing her room behind the bakery. They sat by the window, drinking tea and watching the stars emerge. "Are you nervous?" Vivian asked. "Not about marrying Levi," Zelda answered truthfully, "but about being a wife again." "Yes, a little. I know he's nothing like Gerald, but old fears don't vanish completely." Vivian nodded, understanding. "That's natural, but you're not the same woman you were then, either. You're stronger now, wiser. Because of what happened with Gerald, partly. But also because you chose to grow rather than break." Vivian's expression was thoughtful. "That's rare, you know. Many people who suffer as you did close themselves off from life. You opened yourself to new possibilities instead." Zelda considered this. "I had helped you, the Petersons, Martha." "Levi," Vivian added with a small smile. "Yes, Levi most of all." Zelda twisted her engagement ring, the pearl gleaming in the lamplight. "He really saw me when I felt invisible." "Hold on to that," Vivian advised. "In the difficult moments every marriage faces, remember how you see each other clearly. That's the foundation that will carry you through." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with a crispness in the air that hinted at the coming winter but held it at bay. Zelda dressed with Vivian's help, the ivory silk gown flowing around her like water, the embroidery she'd worked catching the light with each movement. "You look radiant," Vivian said, securing the simple veil with pins. Zelda studied her reflection in the mirror. At 26, she was older and wiser than the hopeful girl who had married Gerald. The lines around her eyes spoke of both laughter and tears. The slight crookedness of her right hand would always remind her of darker days. But her eyes shone with a confidence that had been hard-won, and her smile reflected genuine joy rather than nervous anticipation. "I feel radiant," she replied. "Ready." The ceremony in Redemption Springs small church was brief but meaningful. Zelda walked down the aisle alone, a declaration of independence even in the act of joining her life to Levi's. He waited for her at the altar, his gray eyes never leaving her face, his smile so full of love that it brought tears to her eyes. They had written their own vows, another departure from tradition that raised a few eyebrows but felt essential to both of them. "Zelda," Levi said, his voice steady and clear, "I promise to walk beside you, never ahead to lead or behind to follow, but as your equal partner in all things. I promise to support your dreams as fervently as my own, to respect your independence as the quality that first drew me to you, and to love you completely, in freedom and in commitment, all the days of my life." When it was her turn, Zelda's voice trembled slightly but gained strength with each word. "Levi, I promise to trust you with my heart, knowing you will handle it with care. I promise to build our life together with honesty, respect, and compassion. I promise to face challenges at your side, to celebrate joys in your arms, and to love you openly and without fear, all the days of my life." As they exchanged rings, Levi's a simple gold band that matched her Zelda felt the last shadows of her past receding. This was not an ending or a surrender, but a beginning, a step forward into a future she had chosen freely, with a man who valued her exactly as she was. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss the bride." Levi's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of all the days to come. When they turned to face the congregation as Mr. and Mrs. Lawson, the applause was genuine and warm. The reception at Martha's Cafe was a joyful affair, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the evening. Patrick Peterson gave a toast that made both Zelda and Levi blush with its forthright praise. Dr. Abbott and his sister presented them with a finely crafted medicine chest for their new home. Even Sheriff Davis made an appearance, bringing news that Gerald Thompson had moved to California, apparently having found Tucson unwelcoming after word of his activities in Redemption Springs had spread. As the celebration continued around them, Levi drew Zelda out onto the small porch behind the cafe, where they could have a moment alone beneath the stars. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Deliriously so, Mr. Lawson," she replied, leaning back against his chest. "And you, more than I knew was possible." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I keep thinking about what you said when we first met about those divorce papers costing you plenty." "They did," Zelda said, remembering the emotional and financial toll of fighting for her freedom. "Worth every penny, though," Levi said softly, "because they brought you back to yourself and eventually to me." Zelda turned in his arms to face him. "You were right, you know, that day outside my shop. Freedom does look good on me." "It always will," he promised, gathering her close. "And so does love." As they rejoined their friends and family, Zelda carried that truth in her heart. Freedom and love, far from being opposites, were the twin foundations of the life she and Levi would build together. A life that had begun, paradoxically, with divorce papers clutched like a shield, and a cowboy's simple observation that had opened the door to possibilities she'd thought forever lost. 5 years later, Zelda sat on the porch of their home, watching Levi teaching their 3-year-old daughter, Emma, how to ride her first pony. The little girl's laughter floated across the yard, mingling with the sounds of their 1-year-old son, Thomas, babbling in his cradle beside her. The house had expanded as their family grew a new wing for the children, a dedicated sewing room for Zelda's thriving business. She now employed 2 apprentices in her shop in town, which allowed her to spend more time at home while still maintaining the career she loved. Levi had become a full partner in the Circle P, with Patrick Peterson gradually stepping back as age and arthritis made the physical demands of ranching more difficult. Their partnership had prospered, bringing stability and growth to both their families. As Zelda rocked Thomas's cradle gently with her foot, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain of her first marriage had faded to a distant memory, though she would never forget the lessons it had taught her. The woman she had become, strong, confident, loving, had been forged partly through that suffering, but more importantly through her own determination to claim the life she deserved. Emma squealed with delight as Levi let the pony trot in a small circle, his hands never leaving her secure in the saddle. His patience with their children never ceased to amaze Zelda. The quiet strength that had first attracted her now channeled into fatherhood with the same steadfast devotion he brought to everything he valued. When they completed their circuit, Levi lifted Emma down and sent the pony back to its paddock. The little girl raced toward the porch, her dark hair so like her father's flying behind her. "Mama, did you see? I was riding." "I saw, sweetheart," Zelda said, opening her arms to receive her daughter's enthusiastic embrace. "You were very brave." "Papa says I'm a natural," Emma declared proudly. "Papa is absolutely right," Zelda agreed, smoothing back the child's wayward curls. Levi joined them, settling beside Zelda on the porch swing. He dropped a kiss on Thomas's forehead, then one on Zelda's lips. "Got a letter from Vivian today," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "She's coming back from Boston next month. Says she has big news." "I suspect I know what it is," Zelda replied with a smile. "Dr. William Abbott mentioned that the medical college was considering accepting female students. You think she's been accepted?" "I think Redemption Springs is about to have its first female doctor, yes," Levi chuckled. "The town won't know what hit it." "The town has survived worse shocks," Zelda said, thinking of how much had changed since her return with divorce papers in hand. Redemption Springs was growing, becoming more open to new ideas and possibilities, much as she herself had done. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Levi's arm settled around her shoulders, not possessive, but supportive. In that simple gesture lay the difference between her past and her present, between constraint and liberty, between fear and love. "What are you thinking about?" Levi asked, noting her contemplative expression. "About freedom," she said, leaning into his embrace, "and how it led me home.